my son and I, a couple of months ago, my son and I, he goes to second grade here, and we had gone to a back to school fair, and there was the Lions Club. They had set up their van for eye and ear screening, and next thing you know, I am part of them, and I love their meeting. In fact, I'm just coming back from their meeting because everybody is 80 years and older, and they look at me, everybody looks at me and says, like this young man was saying, and it just really uplifts me. I wish they met more than once a month, so so here I am. And of course, you are absolutely right. I think it was Bob who said, or Wally who said, that it's better than the alternative. So I hope that all of you stay on course, on track to being better than the alternative for a long, long time to come, because Lord knows the world needs Amnesty, and Amnesty needs all of you. Brother Nasrullah has been kind enough to say that I should speak for 30 minutes, but I don't want to bore all of you. I also don't know at what level of knowledge and information are each one of you vis-a-vis the subject that I'm going to be talking about today. I would assume that many of you are aware of the ideology of Hindu supremacism, which is what I'm going to be speaking about. I will start with a brief introduction, although Brother Nasrullah has introduced me, but that's the corporate version. I will give you a very quick, short version of my own introduction. I have been in the United States for all of 3.5 years. I moved here in 2019, May. I have been a career journalist for much of my life. I've now worked for 36 years, which may not seem too much to most of you, but it seems a lot to me. I started as a journalist in India, and then I transitioned while being a journalist to a little bit of work on civil and political rights. My work largely focused in recent years, before I moved here, on the persecution of especially Muslims in India, and who are by the criminal justice system. Now, I am a Hindu. I was born and raised a Hindu. I belong to the Hindu faith. I belong to a Hindu family. I believe in the liberal progressive version of Hinduism, the kind of Hinduism that was handed down to me by my parents' generation and their parents' generation, and especially under the epochal and phenomenal guidance of Mahatma Gandhi, who, as many of you know, is considered the father of the Indian nation. He was the leader of India's freedom struggle. The struggle to free India, rid India of British colonial rule. And India was rid of British colonial rule in 1947, after more than 200 years of being under the British rule. So Mahatma Gandhi was a self-confessed, self-avowed Hindu leader. He believed in Hinduism. He said, I am deeply, deeply connected to my faith, and I run my politics drawing inspiration from my faith. So he was not agnostic. He was not an atheist. He did not even say that my faith is my private matter, but he said, it is my faith that inspires me to fight for everybody, fight for not just for the Hindus, but for everybody. And he gave us a very liberal understanding of what India needs to be. The other ideology, so Gandhi basically said, Hinduism teaches us to be plural. But the ideology of Hindu supremacism says India belongs to the Hindus. And like epic works of fiction, like a big Hollywood movie, this is a battle that goes back 100 years. 100 years ago, in the year 1923, an upper caste Hindu, and some of you may be aware of the intricacies of the Hindu society. The Hindu society has something unique, which is called a caste system, which basically divides our Hindu society horizontally. And there is at the top the people who are the Brahmins. They are at the top, and there are the untouchables or the outcasts who are at the bottom of society. And so Gandhi was somewhere near the top, as he was born in a top caste of society. But towards the end of his life, he started saying that I have changed my caste. I belong to the lowest caste, the untouchable. And he said, I am no more the upper caste. I am at the bottom of the rung, because that's the people I work with. And so this ideology of Hindu nationalism, it was formulated, it was given wing by an upper caste Brahmin from Western India. And he said that India is a Hindu country. India belongs to Hindus. Non-Hindus, such as Muslims and Christians, they are outsiders. They do not have any claim over India because their culture, their gods, their faiths are all from out of India. Therefore, the only way, if the Christians and Muslims, if they want to live in India, they must voluntarily subordinate themselves to the Hindu people. They must voluntarily acknowledge and accept the supremacy of the Hindu faith, the Hindu gods, the Hindu culture, the Hindu way of being, and only then will they be accepted as equal citizens in India. If they do not do so, then they must only live in this land at the mercy of the Hindu people. Now, this ideology was fleshed out, which was this. There's a term in India. It's called Hindutva. I don't want to throw too much information your way. I don't want to complicate your understanding of this subject. So I will just use it once and then move on. But basically, there is a word in India. It's called Hindutva, Hindu, Hindu, and TVA, T for Tom, V for whatever, very, and A for apple, Hindutva. It's supposed to be a Sanskrit word, but it's not a Sanskrit word. It's just crazy. The provenance of these terms is just crazy. But Hindutva is a word that came into prominence, not into prominence, but that was first used sometime in the 1890s. And in 1923, 99 years ago, this upper caste Brahmin man, he wrote a treatise and he said, what is Hindutva? And all the things that I just explained to you, this is what primarily he said in his report, in his short, you can call it a monograph. And that caught wing, it caught fire, it started expanding. In 1925, on the basis of this ideology of Hindu supremacy, and Hindutva is nothing but an ideology of Hindu supremacy. So an organization was founded in 1925. 97 years ago, this organization was founded, and it has an Indian name. I'll translate it for you. It has an abbreviation, acronym called RSS, but it basically translates as National Volunteer Corps, the RSS, right? And the RSS was founded in 1925 with a single objective, which is to convert India into a Hindu nation. This is important to understand because the RSS today, 97 years later, is the world's largest civil society organization. Not only does it continue to exist, it has millions of members in India and outside of India. It has hundreds of millions of dollars in money. It has, India's government is ruled by people who owe allegiance to this organization, RSS. India's Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, has been a member of the RSS from the age of around 10 or 12. And most of India's politicians, India's federal ministers, many state governments in India. India is a union, like the United States is a union of many states. India is also a union. So this ideology is now so ascendant. It is right on top.
It's sent.
Voice message.
No. Yeah.
Sorry.
But
If you could put yourself on mute, Brother Muhammad Ghulam, that would be fine. Yes, thank you so much. So this ideology now, although it sounds fanciful, it sounds like a bad book, a book of fiction, a work of fiction. But this ideology that was literally given flesh in 1923, and the organization called the RSS that was founded in 1925. For decades, they got no play in India because there was a man called Mahatma Gandhi. He gave the alternative vision of what Hinduism is. He gave an alternative vision of not just Hinduism as a faith, but of political Hindutva, of Hinduism, not Hindutva, what political Hinduism is. He led a nation of primarily Hindus. India is today 80% Hindus, Hindus such as myself, 80% Hindus. The Muslims are only 12%. The Christians are only 3%. But of course, the use of the term, the word only, is very misleading because India has 1.4 billion people. So the only 12 to 14% Muslims actually translate to some 200 million plus Muslims. That's a massive number. In fact, the Muslims in India, which we call a minority, are 200 million plus. And that is the second largest population of Muslims in a single country. India has more Muslims than Pakistan has. India has more Muslims than Bangladesh has. India has way more Muslims than any of these, the most populated Muslim countries in the Middle East or West Asia has, such as Saudi Arabia and Egypt. Way, way more. We have 3 times more Muslims than Egypt has, 4 times more Muslims than Saudi Arabia has. We are literally number 2 after Indonesia. Because this ideology was dormant, it was not, the organization RSS still existed. In fact, this organization had a role in the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi barely 5 months after India gained independence, 6 months, barely 5 to 6 months. But the organization itself did not catch the fancy of the people of India, and therefore it did not. So the RSS does not fight elections directly. It has an offshoot. It has a political party that fights elections. It calls itself an apolitical organization. You will be stunned to know the RSS does not file taxes. It does not have a record. It has hundreds of millions of dollars. It has no record of its membership. It's like the KKK. There is no record. There is no registered office. There is no registration. There is no bookkeeping. There is no taxes filed. And yet it is the world's largest organization running the government of the world's largest democracy. Now, why is any of this relevant to us? This is relevant to us because the era of Gandhian liberalism, pluralism, started dying out in the 1980s. And by the time we started out this century, that era was almost dead in India. In 2001, when 9/11 happened, that became an excuse for the then government in India, which was a coalition government, several political parties, but they were led by the political party owned by the RSS. And within 15 days of 9/11, the Indian government started banning Muslim organizations in India left, right, and center. And that began literally the persecution of Muslims on an industrial scale in India began with 9/11. Right? They saw that as an opportunity because the West was preoccupied. America was completely preoccupied. There was, of course, a huge upsurge in Islamophobia in the United States of America, elsewhere in the West. There was massive public sentiment against Muslims, against Islam. That came in very handy for the Indian government. They started literally 15 days, 11th of September and 26th of September, they started banning Muslim organizations. They started arresting hundreds and thousands of Muslims and putting them away in prison, locking them away across the country. And that is the time this whole process started of demonizing India's Muslims. September 2001, barely 5 months later, there was an incident in a state called Gujarat where a train caught fire and about 60 people died in that fire. The BJP, which is the political party of Mr. Modi, the Prime Minister, Mr. Modi himself was the governor of that state. I mean, we in India have a different designation for the chief, for the head of administration, but I'm just using the American designation, the governor of the Indian state. Mr. Modi was the governor of that state, and he used that train burning to organize mass killings of Muslims for days. Literally, he was the head of that operation as the head of government in that state. It's like a US government, let us say a state of Texas, organizing mass killings of African Americans, and nobody can ask a question. And that's what happened in February of 2002, barely 5 months after 9/11, and more than 2,000 Muslims were killed. Men, women, children, pregnant women. It was just ghastly. It was completely ghastly. The police were involved in it. The administration was involved in it. And Mr. Modi was at that point in time the governor of that state. It is absolutely, it sickens, it should sicken the mind. It should sicken our guts and our conscience. The fact that Mr. Modi presided over this massacre, this pogrom of Muslims in his state in 2002, actually contributed to his tremendous support and fan following in the Hindus of India and the Hindus of the West. Several Hindu organizations in the United States immediately started organizing visits for Mr. Modi in the United States. But that could not take place because a couple of years later, the administration of George W. Bush actually banned Mr. Modi, denied him a visa, and banned him from coming to the United States, specifically citing his role in that mass violence against Muslims. This is crazy, but this is what happened. From 2005 to 2014, for 9 years, Mr. Modi could not come to the US because he was denied a visa. To this date, he remains the highest ever public official in any country on the planet to be denied a visa by the United States government for their role in mass violence against a community. In 2014, of course, he became prime minister, and that ban became moot because as prime minister, he could come to the United States. We must understand and remember throughout his ban, when he could not come to the US, the Hindu organizations in America continued to organize Zoom calls, or whatever the predecessor of Zoom was at that point in time, Google, etc., for their communities in large droves. So this ideology that started in 1923, which gave an organization in 1925, fast forward 80 years, in 2001, 9/11 happens, the industrial scale persecution of Muslims starts. In 2014, Mr. Modi is elected prime minister. The complete brainwash of a large number of Hindus in India had happened. We are in that space where Germany was in the 1930s. If you Google 1930s, Germany, India, Hindutva, you will come up with lots of written articles by very established academicians in the West, in America, and in Europe, who will tell you that there is everything in the last 20 years in the Indian society that resembles the German society, the German Christian society of the Hitler days, of the Nazi days. Like I said at the beginning, I am a Hindu. I come from a Hindu family. Both my mother and father had large Hindu families. I do not know a single person in my extended family on both my father's side and my mother's side who have now, my uncles and aunts have now, most of them are dead. My cousins have now become grandparents. I'm talking here 3 generations. I do not know a single individual on both sides of my family who believes that this turn towards supremacism, that this persecution of Muslims and Christians and Muslims in India is a bad thing. It should not happen. They all support it. They all vote for Modi. They all think that this is the right thing for India to do. They have a whole bunch of historical grievances against Muslims and Christians. They have this whole story of how they are the victims, not the Muslims and the Christians, how for centuries the Muslims and Christians have done terrible, horrible things to Hindus of India, and how now it is the time for us to reclaim our land. And that has given rise to a solid parliamentary majority for Narendra Modi, who has won the elections twice. He became prime minister in 2014. And since India follows the British parliamentary model of holding elections every 5 years, so he has won a re-election in 2019. And I dread the next 18 months because in 2024, the month of May, barely 18 months from now, actually less than that, because elections will start. India's elections happen over several weeks. So in April, these elections will start in 2024. And if the Narendra Modi wins that election and becomes prime minister again, you can actually kiss democracy goodbye in India. The moniker that India is the world's second largest democracy will go, and the United States, which is the world's second largest democracy, will become the world's largest democracy. Of course, you guys have another battle at your hands, whether that democracy in America will survive or not. That's something that I read in the papers every day. Now, I will come to the last part of my overview. I did not want to go into too many details. There are lots of details. Since Mr. Modi became prime minister in 2014, he has moved through his government as well as through the non-state actors of the RSS and its affiliate organizations to persecute Christians and Muslims more and more. He has legislated to that effect. Many laws have come in, laws that are openly discriminatory against Muslims and Christians, putting them in prison on false excuses, on saying that they are carrying out conversions, on if a Muslim man marries a Hindu woman. Apart from being a supremacist, rabidly bigoted society, the Indian Hindu society is also very patriarchal. So a Muslim man marrying a Hindu woman is a bad thing. A Muslim woman marrying a Hindu man is a good thing. So when a Muslim man marries a Hindu woman, the Muslim man is arrested, put in prison, beaten to death in many instances. There are so many laws. Muslim women have just been denied in one state of India, which is ruled by the RSS party, denied the right to wear their hijab in schools and colleges. Their hijabs have been taken. All kinds of things are going on. People's homes are being demolished. Muslims' homes are being demolished without so much as a notice from a court. The courts do not even come into the picture. The Supreme Court of India is completely compromised. This should ring a bell to all of you. It should sound familiar to all of you. The Supreme Court of India is completely compromised. That I could go on through the night and talk about it. Why is it relevant for us? Now is the point. There are hundreds, literally hundreds of Hindu organizations in the United States that are joined at the hip with the RSS and this Hindu supremacist movement in India. It should worry all people who support democracy in America that these organizations exist. They exist under the cover of being non-white, liberal, progressive immigrant community. But what they are actually doing, they are spreading the poison of Islamophobia and all kinds of other phobias into the American society. You may have heard, some of you may have, of course, known and heard that on 14th of August this year, which is today is the 7th of November, so 7 days short of 3 months from today, at a parade called by an Indian American organization, in the city of Edison, New Jersey, there was a bulldozer, right? And what was the bulldozer doing there? It had the picture of India's prime minister, as well as the picture of another hardline Hindu supremacist leader who is the governor of India's largest state. And who are these two people, the prime minister and that governor? These are people who have deployed the bulldozer to demolish Muslim homes, businesses, stores, shops, and places of worship without following the due process of law. And this parade in Edison, New Jersey, brought that bulldozer. There was an immediate outcry, especially by Muslim organizations, such as my organization. I happen to be a Hindu who works for a Muslim organization, and the name of my organization is Indian American Muslim Council. My brother Shakib is here, and he is part of our organization. My organization was founded 20 years ago in 2002, right after the mass violence against Muslims that I talked about earlier in the state, where Mr. Modi was governor in 2002. So this organization was founded by Muslims of Indian origin living in the United States 20 years ago. And we are absolutely front and center of this fight, this battle against Hindu supremacy in the United States. So many of us objected. We have a strong ground support in the state of New Jersey. We held a press conference. We got together with a whole bunch of partners. And eventually that organization was forced to apologize for bringing the bulldozer. But the story does not end there, because they do everything in their book to expand the Islamophobia. Initially, they refused to acknowledge that this was Islamophobia, but because the pressure came so much from elected officials and from mayors and city officials, they finally had to acknowledge this was Islamophobia. Now, these Hindu organizations, they are there in Houston. I Googled one day and looked up in Houston, and I found a whole bunch of Hindu organizations that are in absolute lockstep with the Hindu supremacist agenda. They run temples, they run community kitchens, they will appear to be your average harmless immigrant organizations, but they are literally connected with the Hindu supremacists in India. They are working very closely with the Modi government, the administration. They send money from here. They also get money from India. They are pumping in this ideology in various races, elections at the federal level, in US Congress, in state Congress. I'm sure many of you know about the story of this gentleman, the Democratic candidate, Shri Preston Kulkarni, somewhere in Houston in the 2020 election cycle. This created a lot of division in the supporters of the Democratic Party, I heard, because the Indian Muslims absolutely went after him and said, this guy is backed by these Hindu supremacists. We will not support him, whereas the rest of the Democratic Party wanted to support him because obviously the option was the Republican, etc., etc., etc. Now, this is a difficult call. What's happening is that the Hindu Americans are overwhelmingly part of the Democratic Party, and therefore they are overwhelmingly part of the liberal progressive set. Now, the loss of the Hindu American vote will be big for the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is right now struggling with it. There is a pushback from some sections of the Democratic Party in New Jersey. They don't want to lose the vote. But I will stop my my presentation by telling you that I can foresee in the future the liberal progressive values that most that one would say is enshrined in most positions of the Democratic Party. The Hindu supremacist organizations and the ideology of Hindu supremacism is a strange bedfellow. It's not a natural fit. Going forward, I can guarantee you, you will see a lot more friction coming out in the open. I just got an email today saying that the Economist reporter wants to come and speak with us to talk about what went down in New Jersey. The American Prospect, which is a very respected website, have already written about it. Lots of people are coming up and writing about it. The Hindu American, not all of them, not all Hindu Americans, but the ones that are part of these very influential organizations, such as Hindu American Foundation, Hindu Swayam Sevak Sangh, Vishwa Hindu Parishad of America, Seva International, which is a charity organization which raised about $20 million last year for COVID in India. All of these organizations are very closely connected with the Hindu supremacist movement. They are led by Hindu supremacists, and before long, sooner than later, this friction will start coming out in the open. You will see that happening in your own communities. You will see that happen within the ranks that support, I dare say, the Amnesty International. You will see that happening with your doctor, with your friends who are IT engineers. You will see all over, because the ugly truth, it is an ugly truth. A lot of my family members are in the United States, Hindus, and I'm telling you, this is the ugly truth. This is a whole bunch of Hindu Americans who are actually supporting the vile, insidious, bigoted agenda, or the violent agenda of Hindu supremacy back in India. I will stop here, and thank you so much for your time. I hope this was useful, this was informative, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you may have.
Hey, Ajit, thank you so much for your wonderful, you basically took us, it gave us a history lesson from 1923 all the way to today, 1923 in India and today here in the US. So that was a really good history lesson. Looks like Bob Tomlinson's got a question. Go ahead, Bob.
I really enjoyed your talk. I really understand more now than I did before we sat down. I do have a question. You have the Dalai Lama in India. Are they going to ask him and his followers to leave since he is not Hindu?
Not at all, not at all. Dalai Lama is a Buddhist. The Hindu supremacist movement for the current part, considers Buddhists to be an offshoot of the Hindu faith.
That is, yeah.
Essentially, the Hindu supremacist movement is a Brahmanical movement, what we call a Brahmanical movement. It is not just anti-Muslim, anti-Christian, it is also pro-caste. It does not allow lower caste Hindus to come up the rung. It does not allow them to be treated as equal Hindus. Dalai Lama is a great, in fact, Dalai Lama has been very disappointing on these issues of persecution. He never speaks on this. He is a refugee in India, one can understand this, but his own politics has been very suspect. He has hobnobbed with these Hindu supremacists. But leaving him aside, the fact is that the Hindu supremacist ideology, if you read, they wrote copiously. The early founders of this ideology, they wrote copiously. They have been saying from day one, when they founded this organization in 1925, that capture of power is our one and only goal. When India became independent in 1947, at that time they said India must right now become a Hindu nation. Right? Even before India's freedom from British rule, they kept writing that our enemy is not the British. The British are not our enemy. It's all in black and white. It's all written. I'm not making it up. They said the British are not our enemy. Our enemies are within, which are the Muslims and Christians. We have to drive them out. So this is not something, this is not a new agenda. I remember I read one American journalist's book on, and William Shirer, I think his name was, he was in Germany during the Nazi Germany. And he wrote a book and he said, I read 2 of his books. And he writes that he said, I'm surprised that when most Westerners say, oh, we didn't know Hitler would do this. We had no idea. He said, if only they had read his book. He has actually in detail written everything that he would do if he captured power in Germany. And he precisely went out and did exactly what he had written. So the RSS, the ideologues of Hindu supremacism, from day one, they have said, they will not go after the Buddhists right now. They will not go after the Sikhs, the turbaned people right now. They will only go after the Muslims and Christians to begin with. In fact, their early writings said that our enemies are Christians, Muslims, and communists. These are the 3 who are our enemies. And right in the beginning, for years, they said, Germany is our role model. Look at how Germany has driven out, exterminated the Jews. In fact, I'm quoting verbatim, and one of the top guys wrote saying that this is race pride at its highest. So the Holocaust was race pride at its highest. And that is what we have to achieve in India. It's an example for us in India to follow. So the Dalai Lama will stay as long as once they have rid the Muslims, now they are building detention centers like the gulags, like the concentration camps for Muslims already in once. So they are now taking away citizenship of Muslims in India. They have created laws for that. They are asking for proof of citizenship. Now they're saying, show us that your parents, or you show us your birth certificate going back 50 years, show us your parents' birth certificate going back 50 years, or show us a piece of land in your name going back 50 years. For I was not born in a hospital. I don't have a birth certificate. I was born at home. My parents were born at home. My parents never bought a piece of land, nor did I. So there is no document that can prove that I have, for centuries, my family has lived in India. But they have also brought a parallel law saying that all those who cannot prove their citizenship, if they are not Muslims, they will be considered refugees from neighboring Muslim majority countries, and they will be given back their citizenship. So we are literally looking at a potential statelessness and disenfranchisement of 200 million plus Muslims in India. Let me also just tell you one more thing. The Hindu supremacists in America, they have started influencing legislation. In the month of June, the legislature of the state of Illinois passed a law. The law mandated the creation of something called an Indian American Advisory Council. All right. And the Indian American Advisory Council, so far, so good. But the fine print of that law says that India primarily means the non-Muslim country of India. Non-Muslim country of India. Even the Indian constitution does not identify itself as a non-Muslim country. The Indian constitution does not make any reference to who is in the majority and who is in the minority. But a law in the state of Illinois in the United States of America now identifies India as a primarily non-Muslim country. And now, as I speak, they are busy appointing Hindu supremacists to that 21-member Indian American Advisory Council. That's what's going on in the state of Illinois.
Wow.
Well, does anybody else who have any questions? Wally, go ahead, unmute yourself and ask.
So I guess I actually have two questions. One would be, is there a movement within the Hindu faith to oppose this this conservative movement? And my second is very much afar, and that is, could the economics of India be affected by boycotts in this country of corporations in India?
All right, this is more than two questions. Okay, let me start with the first part. Now, as with my presentation, the first question has different answers for India and the United States. We have both qualitative and quantitative data to discuss this. In India, the Hindus are 80%. But at the last elections in 2019, Mr. Modi's party won a plurality of seats in India's parliament by winning just 36% of the vote. Now, how is this possible? Because unlike the United States, India is not a two-party country. So you don't have to cross 50% to win a seat or majority. India has, you will be surprised, India has more than 500 registered political parties. In any given election in a district, you will find probably 30, 40, 50, 100 contestants. At least 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 of them would be serious, with serious backing. So Mr. Modi got 36% of the vote, right, in 2019, the last time he won a parliamentary majority. He was, of course, in a coalition. So in some seats across India where he would not contest, his party would not contest, but his coalition partners would contest. Let us say that his coalition got a little over 40% of the total vote, national vote, right? Now, if Hindus are 80%, and yet Mr. Modi's coalition got 40% of the vote, if we assume that only Hindus voted for Mr. Modi's coalition, then only 40 out of 80 people voted for Mr. Modi's coalition, which means fully 50% of the Hindus did not vote for his coalition. That is a ray of hope for us. That shows us that India is electorally a very complex country. It's a very complicated country, a complex country. There are parts of India where the Mr. Modi's party does not even exist on the ground. For example, there is a southern state called Tamil Nadu, and you can forget its name. I don't want to complicate your life with too many pronouns from India, exotic sounding names. But there's a southern state, which incidentally is the state with the first ever Christian church in India. And the Christianity came to India within 100 years of Christianity is coming into existence. Islam came to India within about 40 years of Islam coming into existence. So in this southern state where 95% of the population is Hindu, Mr. Modi's political party has barely been able to get 2 or 3% of the vote. Because it's complex, I don't want to get into those details. So in India, we have quantitative data, which tells us that it's not as if it's a slam dunk for them. What they do manage to do, however, In the north of India, like you have the south-north divide or the coastal divide in America, like the coasts are blue, but the Midwest and the Bible Belt and the South are red. You also have in India where you can say that the north of India, which is the more populated part of India, is very red if I were to give a color to Mr. Modi's party, or rather I would call it saffron, because saffron is the color of Hindu religion and they have adopted that as the color of their party and their movement, Hindu supremacist movement. So that is what is going on. North India, where bulk of the population lives, that is where they have made deep inroads. In my family, my aunt, my mother's younger sister, she lost her son, my cousin. He was 50 years old. He died of COVID. COVID mismanagement was absolutely out of the world. The Economist has written, the World Health Organization has said that India undercounted its COVID deaths by 1:8. So for all 8 people dying, India counted only 1. My aunt, she lost her son. He was 50, left behind 2 little kids. My aunt, a widow, 75-year-old widow, heartbroken by the loss of her son who died. She did not even see his face. He did not get a bed in hospital. He could not get an oxygen cylinder. And yet 4 months later, she went ahead and voted for Modi's party, which was in power in the state at that time. Why? Because she believes that India needs to be a Hindu nation. So we have some very, very absolutely brainwashed multitudes of people in India who are supportive of this. The other factor that we have to understand is the entire election machinery. And again, 5 years ago, I would have had difficulty explaining this to any of you, but today you will understand it in a snap of a finger. Today, India's election is managed by people who are very partisan and supporters of Mr. Modi's party. They are the managers of elections across the country. Okay, the courts are packed with their judges. The election machinery is packed with their people. Plus, oversight is, you are worried about America? Oversight in India is probably 1/100th of what it is in America. God forbid, but you will not see people being shot dead. In India, it's very common for people being shot dead at counting centers. The entire counting centers are hijacked. There's a blackout of information. Nobody knows what's happening there. So all of the control of the machinery, the federal agencies, the counterpart of the FBI, the counterpart of the CIA, the counterparts of of all these federal agencies, they are going out and arresting opposition leaders and putting them away in prison and false charges of corruption and stuff like that. That is the rule right now. There are hundreds of people, academicians. There are dozens of academicians who are critics of the government who are right now in prison. They have been convicted of sedition. If you want to understand what's going on in India, you have to start thinking of India as you would think of China, as you would think of Russia. Actually, I would say Russia is better than India. China might be on par, but Russia is better than India. There is still criticism possible in Russia. It's not happening in India anymore. So because Mr. Modi has complete control of the government, now that's the India part. In the US, there is an organization called Hindus for Human Rights that was started by liberal progressive Hindus 3 years ago in 2019. They are doing, yes, absolutely, 291 election deniers are running for election, exactly. But here you have grassroots election. There, they're not even elected. They're just appointed by the federal government. Nobody knows who are these people managing elections. That's what's going on in India. So in the US, we have a strong organization that has come up in 3 years, Hindus for Human Rights. They are fundamentally opposed. They're very vocal. They are very outspoken. They show up everywhere. They are a very tiny group, but they're very critical and they're very important. And they're punching far above their weight. They do not have support of the community. They're not able to raise big funds, so they're doing with institutional donors, but they're doing a very good job. They work shoulder to shoulder with me. They have people here, staff here in Washington, D.C. We work together. We have Hindus in many places in America who are opposed to this Hindu supremacism. But again, this will be something easy for people in America to understand, especially on the left of center scale, is that most Hindus, when they become liberal progressive, they stop thinking and behaving like Hindus. They just become global citizens. Like, it's like the Christian people, when the Christian, I don't like the word fundamentalist or fanatics, but the Christian people who believe in a conservative agenda, they are not really challenged in their churches, because the people who become truly liberal progressives they don't go to the church as often as they should. So that space is vacated. So that's what's happening with the religious conservative agenda of the Hindu faith and the people on the followers of Hinduism. What was the last part of your question? I've forgotten now. I was answering the first part. You got to unmute yourself, Wally.
Yes, I was also interested. It seems like there's a lot of economic interactions.
Yes, economic part.
Between
Yes.
the U.S. and the
So India's economy is in a downward spiral. The Indian government, by its own admission, this is important. India has 1.4 billion people, right? It is second in country population to China, and it should overtake China in the next 5 to 10 years. Of the 1.4 billion people in India, the federal government itself says that it gives free food every day to 850 million people.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Sorry, what?
Excuse me, what did you say?
India has 1.4 billion people,
I heard that part.
and the federal government gives free food to 850 million people
Every day.
every day. So therefore, we can surmise that if the federal government stopped giving food to 850 million people every day, India's population in perhaps a couple of months would go down from 1.4 billion people to about 650 million people.
Wow.
Right? India's economy is in a tailspin because India's industries are dying. International investment is pulling out. Automobile companies, the auto sector is a very good indicator of the health of an economy. It's like the pulse of a nation's economy. The automobile companies from the world over are drastically cutting their output production, shutting down factories. Anecdotally speaking, my childhood friends, my friends who are in business, they are literally bleeding. People are committing suicide. If you Google it, businessman, India, suicide, not only are businessmen committing suicide, there are family suicides. The entire family of husband, wife, and children are committing in a suicide pact. They're killing themselves because they cannot run their business anymore. There is no more money. The rupee, the Indian currency, the Indian rupee, when Modi became prime minister in 2014, the Indian rupee was about 60 to a dollar. Right now, it is about 82 to a dollar. Because India has a net trade deficit, it imports more than it exports. The consequences of a weakening Indian currency and a strengthening dollar is catastrophic for India, catastrophic for Indian economy. In any case, Indian imports have gone up and India's exports have gone down. So it's a long lecture. Unfortunately, again, the Indian news media, I didn't talk about it. Indian journalists are in prison in their hundreds. And so the Indian news media, the New York Times of India, the Washington Post of India, the CNN of India, they are all run by editors who are members of the RSS. That's that civil society organization I talked to you about. So they're worse than Fox News, they're worse than America One or what have you, right? They're completely, they're pushing false stories. This week, one of the Indian movies, cinemas, is being released in the cinemas with a false claim that the ISIS abducted 32,000 Hindu women from India and converted them into sex slaves, which is complete nonsense. It doesn't exist. It hasn't happened. But there is a proper feature film. There's a movie that's been made on this false premise, and it's being released in cinemas this week. So there's an extensive demonization with false information, false data, false history, false present details, and the economy is part of this. So the news media, if you look at the top newspapers, the business newspapers in India, they will not tell you any of this story, but it still leaks out. It comes out. The International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, they've all been cutting down India. India was the one country in 2020, its economic growth rate was minus 40% or something. it drastically lost people. And India is so poor that millions of people they barely survive their subsistence level. There's no food security. If you read the WHO data, World Health Organization data, the FAO data, which is a UN agency, if you read the UNDP data, India is extremely poor. The bulk of the world's poor people live in India. And many of them, when COVID shut down, when Modi announced COVID shut down, millions of the, okay, Janet. So millions of these people, they walked for 1,000 miles to go back to their villages, literally walked 1,000 miles because they had no food. People died on the way, right? And when they reached home, they probably still voted for Modi's party because in the next election, Modi won the election. I mean, state elections. There's not been a parliamentary election since COVID. But what I'm saying is the economy, India's economy is in shatter. It's complete tatters. It has shattered. When I speak with people, I speak with industry because I lived in India. I lived in New Delhi, India's capital. I was a parliamentary reporter. I reported at the topmost levels. I was connected with industry captains in the capacity of a reporter. So I have networks there. Nobody has the courage to say a word. There was one industrialist whose grandfather had been, was like an adopted son to Mahatma Gandhi. And he runs one of India's, he's now deceased, but he ran and his now children run one of India's largest automobile companies. His grandfather was a freedom fighter under Gandhi. And this man, he had the courage at one program in 2019 to stand up to one of Modi's leading ministers at a public event and say, look, you are falsifying data. Our economy is in a bad shape. But I can send you that video clip, you can see it. He's since deceased. But nobody has the courage, no industrialist, no businessman, no election official, no politician, no academician. Professors are being jailed. All of that is happening in India. That is where we are. I tell you, it's worse than Russia.
Wow, this is a lot of information. And thank you, Ajit. It's like 7:26 our time here. Thank you so much for your wonderful talk. And I'm sure we all learned a lot from this talk. And if nobody has any questions, I have a couple announcements to make of future meetings. Does anybody have any quick questions? A 30-second question?
Well, one thing, Wally, maybe if he could suggest a video for us to show at our discussion class, that might be something that people would be really interested in. So I don't know if you have so what we do at a discussion class, we have about 20 minutes video about a subject, and then we discuss it. So if you could send Muhammad or any of us a video that you think would, tell the story in that length of time or part of it, just let us know.
Sure. Absolutely. There are many videos on the internet. Okay. And yeah, I can show you, I can send you the video.
Yeah, send me, Ajit, send me the link. I'll share it with Bob and Wally because they are at their church. They run this discussion series every Sunday morning at 8:45. Yeah. And like Bob said, they watch a video and then discuss it.
Brother Nasrullah, can I just close with one statement, just one statement?
Okay, sure.
Collapse of democracy in India. There's a VDEM Institute in Sweden, which has already said that India is an electoral autocracy. Freedom House, which is a Washington, D.C. based research organization, for 2 years, it has downgraded Indian democracy from being free to partly free. It says India is not free, India is partly free. Amnesty International, of course, does tremendous amount of reporting on India. Amnesty International has been hounded out of India and criminal cases have been filed against it. Here's what I would like to leave, the last thought I would like to leave you guys with. If democracy collapses in India, or I should say when democracy fully collapses in India, it is going to have a domino impact on democracies in much of the rest of the non-Western world. India's freedom from British rule in 1947 was a signature moment. It was absolutely amazing because it triggered It triggered freedom struggles across the world, in Southeast Asia, in Africa, in Latin America. Gandhi is revered across the world. Martin Luther King Jr., before the voting rights and civil rights movement, he traveled to India, and he is on record saying that until I had read Gandhi, I did not know how to shape my own civil rights action. Now, India's collapse as a democracy is going, and just as the US, America's collapse as a democracy, it just boggles the mind. It's unthinkable. Similarly, should be India's collapse as a democracy. Remember that India's constitution outside of the Western world is the only constitution that has held sway over 3 generations since 1950. Countries like Pakistan and many countries in Africa, they have replaced their constitutions like people change their clothes every 10 years, people change their houses and jobs, right? India's constitution in 1950 promised what even America did not promise. It was still illegal in America in some states for blacks and white people to intermarry, but it was not illegal in India. India had a remarkably forward-looking, progressive constitution in 1950. So it is not just India's future which is at stake, it is the world's future which is at stake. And it seems imminent that both Indian democracy and American democracy may be jumping into the ocean, holding hands together.
Oh, excellent.
Okay. All right. So before we close this meeting, first of all, I want to thank Ajit for this wonderful, wonderful talks, and thanks for taking time out of your really busy schedule to talk to our group here in Houston. Our next meeting is on 5th of December. We always meet on the first Monday of the month. And this time, our keynote speaker is Rhonda Hart. Rhonda is the mother of Kimberly, who was murdered at the Santa Fe High School shooting. I think it was a couple of years back. And I talked to Rhonda, and she has been working in the area of what legislations to bring or to pass to increase safety to children from gun violence. So she's going to talk about that. That meeting is on the 5th of December, same time, 6:15. And then on the 10th of December, it's Human Rights Day. Human Rights Day all over the US, and we are going to celebrate that with a luncheon at Sawa at 11 o'clock. Okay, it's a luncheon, and just let us know, let Bob or me or just send us an email so we'll know how many people are showing up, so we can reserve a section of the restaurant. Okay. Bob, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, one thing. So Deanna Dwyer, she's not going to be speaking in December. I thought that was when we talked about her going to speak. You know, about the Native Americans.
Was that, I don't know that, since that was not, if that's confirmed, I can always ask Rhonda to join
Okay,
us.
because I haven't. We've been so busy. I haven't really had time to really talk to her, but I will contact her and see what she said, because we were trying to get a biography, remember? And so we said, hey, we would try to, but anyway, we'll talk about it offline. That's all right.
All right. Okay, guys. All right. Thank you all for joining us.
You don't want the book?
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
After I did all of this, you're going to.
Okay, do it.
I've been looking at y'all real close up because I can see your names. All right, okay. Let's see what it is. All right, let's see.
Nancy, what are you saying?
Wally.
No. You can't.
All right. That's right. He won last time.
I won last week. Or
all
last
right,
month.
Let's see here. Let me see if I can find someone else.
What are you showing? Nancy.
M. Nassim, Nasim.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he's there. Hey, Brother Naseem, you just won a gift card to Brazos bookstore in the Montrose area.
Oh, thank you. Can I make that as a donation to IAMC?
If you want, that's fine.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. So, okay. All right. Okay,
Thank you,
so
Ajit.
I'll see you all.
Ajit, one quick question. Like, what can we do, to help this current situation in India?
That's not that's not a small question that needs another hour. So I would leave it to Brother Nasrullah since he's closed the proceedings. Let's connect again, and you can inshallah get my phone number from Brother Nasrullah, and let's talk about it.
Okay, thanks.
Can I
Okay.
mention something last? I'm right from Ahmedabad, Gujarat. And I've seen the violence when it started in 1969. I was right there. And what happened? I mean, it's by the same RSS and all that. And one of my reasons coming to this country is what I saw. And that's the one reason I decided to come to this country, which one way to say I should have stayed and fight, but,
And now
And-
we have to fight them here in
and-
America, sister.
And my parents, this in 2002, what happened? They were in Navsari. Navsari also had in the Gujarat. And they had to be in the middle of the night. They had to be moved all the time because people comes in like 200, 300, big mob comes and they burn the people. And I've seen all these things. They burn the people, they get them out. And this is going on. And right now in UP, they are really bulldozing, what I understand. In UP area, northern part.
I have to I have to jump to another call. Actually, it started
Oh,
at
okay.
my
All right,
8:30.
Okay,
So,
thank you. It was very good talk.
sister,
Thank
I
you.
would love to connect
Just,
with you.
Saida,
Brother
Saida
Nasrullah.
Siddiqui, if you want to receive our meeting notices and would like to attend our monthly meetings, just send me your email address and I will add you to our distribution list.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, folks. Thank you all. See you
Thank
on,
you for
see
showing
on
up.
December 5th.